There's something almost hypnotic about snow, that hush that descends when each flake drifts earthward, transforming the world into a silent canvas. In that quiet, every mark takes on meaning. A stray twig becomes a signpost, a crack in the ice feels like a wound, and footprints. Footprints are the handwriting of the night itself, telling a story we were never meant to read. On the morning of February 9th, 1855, that story unfolded across the rolling moors and farmsteads of Devonshire, England. As dawn broke over the Somerset Hills, farmers stepped out into a scene that would ripple through parish churches, land agents' offices, and even the Royal Society in London. Something had passed through the freshly fallen snow, something that left not the familiar tracks of fox or sheep, but a regimented procession of hoof-like prints, each nearly 3 inches long, spaced at perfect intervals and stretched in a straight line for miles. They called them the Devil's Footprints. It was the vicar of Buckland Monacorum, Reverend John Skinner, who first raised the alarm. He later wrote in his journal that the footprints commenced at the front door, crossed the hall, passed under the bedstead, emerged again on the other side, and then continued unbroken for some 40 miles. He measured them carefully. 2 indentations side by side, each set slightly angled like a cloven hoof. And the line never wavered, never paused, as though guided by an unseen hand. By mid-morning, word had spread to neighboring villages. Shepherds on Dartmoor found the same curious patterns snaking between tors. A miller in Tavistock discovered prints on the roof of his barn defying gravity, and a gamekeeper near Exmouth reported that the trail vanished at a 5-foot wall, only to reappear on the far side, undisturbed. No broken stones, no disturbance of the mortar. In an age when church bells tolled warnings of sin as readily as they called the faithful to prayer, the idea that the devil himself might have walked those hills was both terrifying and irresistible. Candlelit meetings were convened in parish halls, where anxious voices speculated on the meaning of these infernal tracks. Some believed it was Satan's grand tour of God's green earth, a blasphemous display of power, a taunt directed at mortal men. A letter to the Exeter Gazette summed up the popular sentiment. Surely these must be the footprints of the Prince of Darkness, venturing out on this frozen eve to tempt the pious and bring dread to the stoutest hearts. Farmers barred their doors, mothers whispered prayers over their children, and every gust of wind through the shuttered windows sounded like the devil's breath on the pane. Yet beneath the fear, curiosity took root. The local magistrate, a pragmatic man with an eye for detail, commissioned sketches of the prints. Illustrations were circulated in newspapers as far away as London, and soon the Royal Society received petitions from learned gentlemen demanding explanations. What natural force, they wondered, could leave such a precise, uninterrupted mark? In an era when modern meteorology was still in its infancy, extraordinary weather phenomena were often blamed for the inexplicable. Whirlwinds and waterspouts, it was known, could lift small creatures, frogs, fish, even insects, then deposit them miles from their native marshes. An eccentric correspondent to the Times suggested that a tornado had swept across the estuary, gathered toads and lizards, and scattered them like confetti in the night. But the devil's footprints were no random scatter. They marched in military precision. 2 prints, 3 inches apart, then another pair, then another, always moving northward. The depth was consistent, the width unchanging. Where the trail met walls and fences, no sign of force was detected. In villages, doors were locked, gates bolted. Yet the prints skirted these obstacles as if through a ghostly portal. The geologist Andrew Johns, writing to a colleague in Bath, proposed a new hypothesis. He described the prints as the impressions of hares bounding in a rear foot first landing, imagining that each hind paw, larger and more oval than the fore, left a deceptive mark. In moments of panic or balance, a hare might place forepaws down, creating twin indentations. But when Johns measured the spacing, it exceeded any known leap of Lepus timidus in that region. And hares, notoriously skittish, zigzag rather than march in compass-perfect lines. Even the celebrated entomologist, Dr. Helena Fairchild, weighed in. She argued that a herd of goats, perhaps escaped from a traveling circus, could produce cloven hoofprints. And yet, no goats were reported missing. No hoof marks were found elsewhere. No droppings, just footprints, pristine and undisturbed. Faced with baffling evidence, the people of Devonshire turned to an older logic: the power of story. In West Country folklore, the devil was said to roam on midsummer nights, fiddling for souls at crossroads, leaving hoofprints on consecrated ground. Some claim to have seen him, a tall figure, black as smoke with eyes like embers, gliding over the snow with uncanny speed. Others claim to have heard the echo of iron shoes clinking against stone. Mrs. Murphy, an innkeeper in Horrabridge, swore that, on the night in question, she glimpsed a silhouette moving past her window. A lanky form, head bent, dragging what sounded like chains. She bolted the shutters and prayed the rosary until morning. When the snow came, there were the tracks. 36 pairs leading away from her cottage and never returning. Yet folklore has its own logic. It shapes what we expect to see and hear. And as the tracks of the devil took on a life of their own, new stories sprouted, each more elaborate than the last. Children dared each other to follow the prints at night. Poets penned odes to the icebound devil, and engravers sold prints of a demonic cloven hoof clutching a pitchfork under a crescent moon. The legend grew, even as the snowfall dwindled. By mid-February, the snow had begun to thaw. The devil's footprints, once crisp and deep, grew shallow and watery. Many sections dissolved beneath slush and mud. Farmers plowed their fields, sledges returned to the lanes. And, as the country turned its attention to the political tensions in Europe, the affair faded from the front pages. But the mystery persisted. Parish records preserved the sketches. Private letters between country gentlemen debated the most plausible theory. The Royal Society's final conclusion, published later that year, acknowledged that no single explanation accounted for all the evidence. They listed 13 possibilities, from animal misidentification to fleeting meteorological phenomena, then closed the report with the admission that the case remained one of the most extraordinary of our age. A century and a half later, in an era of infrared cameras and GPS collars, the devil's footprints might seem quaint, yet enthusiasts still retrace the 40-mile route, following the general path across Buckland, Meavy, and Tavistock. They march through knee-deep drifts, coffee thermoses in hand, eyes peeled for any sign of the supernatural or the scientific. Some come hoping to find hidden caves or undetected animal lairs. Others seek the thrill of the unexplained. Few find more than empty fields and half-melted puddles. In 2009, a team from the University of Plymouth set up a series of motion-activated cameras along a recreation of the original trail. They hoped to rule out deer, foxes, or feral goats. Night after night, the cameras clicked, revealing only hedgehogs, badgers, and the occasional fox. No hoofed creature. No devilish silhouette. One video even captured a hare, bounding in erratic arcs, leaving only its shadow on the snow. And yet the editors of the Devon Historical Review still receive letters each winter, reports of fresh hoofprints in unlikely places, photos of mysterious tracks alongside fence posts, sketches taped to pub bulletin boards. The story endures, not because it demands belief, but because it invites wonder. Let us pause now and consider the candidates. First, the natural. Hares stumbling in crusty snow, misinterpreted by dawn-blinded eyes. Plausible in small segments, but impossible to sustain for 40 miles in a single straight line. Second, atmospheric oddities. A tornado of toads, a waterspout lifting creatures from the estuary. Romantic and grounded in documented animal reign, yet unable to account for the uniformity and precision of the prints. Third, escaped livestock. Goats from a traveling menagerie, or perhaps a herd of deer displaced by a storm. But no beast could clear locked gates or vault 4-foot walls without leaving some trace beyond 2 neat hoof marks. Fourth, the supernatural. Satan himself on a frozen promenade, leaving mocking footprints stamped by infernal will. Rich in symbolism, potent in folklore, but ultimately untestable by science. Each theory stumbles before the totality of the evidence. No one solution fits every detail. So we are left with a choice. Cling to the rational and accept that some puzzle pieces will never mesh, or entertain the possibility that the world still hides marvels beyond our grasp. Perhaps the devil's footprints endure in our imaginations because they remind us of how little we truly know. In an age of satellites and supercomputers, a simple winter's snowfall once revealed an enigma that confounded farmers, magistrates, and gentlemen of science alike. It speaks to our hunger for story, our craving to walk unknown paths, to confront the boundary between the explainable and the inexplicable. So the next time snow falls in the dead of night, consider this. When you wake and peer out at the glimmering world, what stories are written upon its surface? Could there be a line of hoofprints heading northward that defy every law you know? And if you followed that trail through silent fields, over stony walls, into the dark heart of the moor, what would you find at the end? A hare? A gust of wind? Or something that leaves no prints at all, save in the memory of those who dare to believe? Because in the end, the devil's footprints are more than a peculiar footnote in Devonshire lore. They are an invitation to embrace the unknown, to let the hush of snow fall around you, and to step lightly into the hush, listening for the echo of a story that refuses to be silenced.